Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Time About the Movies. And today we're looking at June 9th, 1989, and it's another full review episode because there was only one movie that came out this weekend, and, well, it certainly doesn't have the same impact as Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade did. This was heavily advertised as going to be the final adventure of the Star Trek crew, the original Star Trek crew. William Shatner, Leonard Nimoy, DeForest Kelley, James Doohan, Walter Koenig, Nichelle Nichols, George Takei. This was going to be the last adventure, and then let's just say the end result was not what they expected. So, let's go ahead and take a look at this. This is the fifth installment of the Star Trek franchise, what was supposed to be the last adventure. This is Star Trek V, The Final Frontier. Now, before we delve into this one, I might as well talk about the previous four films that came before this one. Star Trek The Motion Picture, I think, is one of those interesting failures. It's not a bad movie per se. I really enjoy it, but you can obviously see a lot of the plot problems with it. Like, it's a very slow-moving picture. It's a movie that you really have to take your time with it to really appreciate it. I don't think everything about it truly works, but there are a lot of elements in there I do like. I don't want to say it's a bad movie in particular, but I don't think it was right where they wanted it to be. Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan, I don't really need to say anything about that one. That was a classic. That one really upped the game on what made these movies so unique and so different compared to the TV series. And Ricardo Montalban as Khan. What more do you need to say? Just a great movie overall. Star Trek III: The Search for Spock was all right. Was a decent continuation of the Wrath of Khan, but overall not quite as good as the Wrath of Khan, but still pretty enjoyable. And then Star Trek IV: The Voyage Home was an interesting movie. It's definitely more mainstream compared to the other movies, and it definitely felt like Leonard Nimoy making his... I believe this was his first movie as a director, or did he direct Part 3? I'm not entirely sure. Give me one. Okay, I did look it up. He did direct Star Trek 3. But Star Trek 4 was a big success, not just for Star Trek fans, but also just for bringing in a mainstream audience, and kind of help revive Star Trek a bit, because not but shortly after that we got Star Trek: The Next Generation, and now we have Star Trek V: The Final Frontier, which brings in William Shatner as a director, and you figure Leonard Nimoy did it twice and it worked very well. Jonathan Frakes, who played Riker in The Next Generation, would have success as a director of the two Star Trek films later on in the 90s. So why not Captain Kirk? Why not let him direct a movie? And then we actually saw the movie, and we saw why you should never let William Shatner direct another Star Trek movie. But, yeah, this was a mess. This is still a mess. And, some people could blame the writer's strike of '88, because this was happening when the writer's strike was happening, back in 1988, which affected a number of movies. But, I mean, this movie was just not good. This was not a very good movie. It really did feel like that... How do I put this? It's one of the producers of this movie said that this film nearly killed the franchise, which is hard to believe because Star Trek: The Next Generation was such a big success at the time, but that tells you a lot, that this movie was so bad that this movie almost destroyed the franchise in particular. I mean, this movie felt like it was directed by the same William Shatner from that SNL sketch, I think, when Star Trek 4 came out, when he hosted SNL. When he goes to the convention, he tells all these Star Trek fans to just get a life. I feel like this movie was made by the same William Shatner, who basically said, I'm going to make a movie so terrible that that Star Trek fans will have to get a life, and I can stop doing these movies. And sure enough, this movie really did not work out. I mean, it really did not feel like a good movie was being made here, and it's amazing how so many people, including the longtime people who've been with the series, including Gene Roddenberry, Leonard Nimoy, DeForest Kelley, they were all so objected to this premise and the script that it's amazing that Shatner was able to still get them to do this movie. But I guess they figured the movie was going to be a success regardless, but lo and behold, it really wasn't. And I mean, right away you could kind of see why this movie wasn't successful. I mean, there are parts in here where I get what Shatner's trying to do. There's a great moment where they're sitting around a campfire, and then William Shatner's talking about, Captain Kirk's talking about how he knows it. He knows that because in the early in the movie, there's a scene where he's on a cliff, and he's climbing it, and so he goes talks to Bones and Spock later on at the campfire and says, "Well, I knew I wasn't going to fall because I know that you guys are with me, and I know that I'm never going to be alone." And he says, like, I've always known that I'll die alone. And you know what? I mean, it's an interesting scene to have for a guy. And it's something that this movie could have easily added on to that, but it's hardly ever mentioned again after this. And I know that some comic books, including, I think Star Trek Generations has a prequel that's not in the actual movie, where it actually delves more into that with Bones and Chekhov. But not in this movie. But I mean, it's an interesting setup here. But when you see what it really leads into, however, it just doesn't. It still baffles me why they thought that this scene in particular that I'm about to show you was so important. They go away from that and then they decide, you know, let's sing a campfire song. Let's sing "Row, Row, Row Your Boat." And you wouldn't think that wouldn't be a big deal, but yeah, what's the point of this song being in the movie? It'd be one thing if it was just that one scene, but it gets mentioned numerous times throughout this movie, including in the end credits. Like, they think that this is what the movie needs to end on, and it's just like, what's the point here? What's the point of having this scene in there? I mean, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to the story that we're getting into here. And we haven't even gotten to the main story yet. We haven't even talked about the bad guy of this movie, which is Sybok. And the interesting story about Sybok is that they wanted to get Sean Connery for this role, but obviously he turned it down for another Paramount sequel, which turned out to be a better opportunity for him than this. And it got to the point where they actually called the planet that they're going to search for whatever it is they're searching for as Shakari. It's literally Sean Connery, but it's Shakari. So that's an interesting thing that I don't know why they did it, but there you go. But the editing in this movie is also really off, too. There are moments here where there's just dead air for, like, several seconds, and somebody will just say something like, "Oh, I could use a shower." And then someone else will go, "Yes, yes." And it's back to, like, dead silence. It's just like, what's the point of these scenes? Like, what are you trying to do here, Shatner? And it's Kirk and Spock talking about that when they're going into the Enterprise and all that. But yeah, there's also another part where they're trying to get away from the bad guys, and they fire these jetpacks, these rockets that take them up into the Enterprise, and you see all these deck numbers, like Deck 53, Deck 54, Deck 64, and then it goes back down to Deck 63, and then Deck 58, and then the numbers just keep going all over the place, and you're thinking, what the heck is going on here? Are we entering like a labyrinth or Inception type of thing where just anything could happen? I mean, it just doesn't make a whole lot of sense, and really nothing about this movie makes a whole lot of sense. The bad guy, who really isn't, he's not necessarily a bad guy in this movie, but he has this, basically what they're trying to do here is trying to find God. And they literally say in the movie, they're trying to find God. And it's just like, you're really going to go there, aren't you? I mean, and they talk about it, and even that plan really doesn't work out. But, oh, by the way, I should say this about Sybok and Spock. They're half brothers in this movie, so, and the way they try to just say that there's a scene where Kirk, Spock, and Bones get caught by caught and put in like a jail cell, and Kirk is just like, "I ordered you to defend your ship," and Spock is just like, "You ordered me to kill my brother," and Kirk is just like, "Your brother? There's no way you could have a brother, because I know for a fact you don't have a brother," and Spock is just like, "Well, no, I don't have a brother, I have a half-brother," and it's just like, you want to fill us in on that? It's just like, nope, doesn't even get mentioned ever again. It's just like, no, they're half-brother. It's just like, okay, how is Sybok and Spock supposed to be half-brothers? They don't even look alike to be brothers to begin with. It's just like, what is the purpose here? Like, why we have to connect this? This isn't like in Batman where the Joker and Bruce Wayne are connected because the Joker killed his parents in the theater alley in the '89 Batman movie. We'll get to that whenever we get to that movie, but in here it makes no sense whatsoever, and it just doesn't click. You know what else doesn't click? I'm baffled by this scene. I think a lot of Star Trek fans are baffled by this scene where Uhura's trying to get these captives away from where these officials are holding their meeting at, and these officials from these different areas of the galaxy. Yeah, it's literally a human, a Klingon, and a Romulan in a. They have this diplomatic meeting in a bar for some reason. I mean, you could. There are other places you could have gone to, and so they have to go. The crew has to go and save them from the bad guy, and Uhura decides to distract them by doing a dance. Yeah. I mean, I'll give it to Nichelle Nichols. She's putting her all into it, and she does have a pretty funny line after they capture him. It's just like, I've always wanted to play to a captive audience, but you notice that the music that she's singing to, that's not her singing voice. That's someone else that they dubbed over, and apparently she got really upset over that. And but at the same time, though, what was the point of that scene really to add to this? I mean, there's no real point to that scene in particular. But it's just like that all over the movie. They have these scenes that make no sense whatsoever. These setups really don't make a whole lot of sense whatsoever. We don't really know what Sybok can do with this ability to take away somebody's pain. They don't really go into it. They don't really express it, why he's doing this. But yeah, let's talk about the climax of the movie, because throughout the movie they're talking about how the Great Barriers, there's no way any ship can get through there, because anyone that gets through there has been severely damaged or destroyed. And the ship, when they finally get to the Great Barrier, you're expecting this huge moment for the ship to somehow get through here, and it just goes in there without no damage to the ship whatsoever. The ship isn't even shaking or anything. So, where was the great danger here? Where was the danger in this? And you just got to think to yourself, like, what were they thinking here? It's like, did all the other ships just look at this and go, oh, yeah, I'm just going to go away from that. That looks too scary for me. It's just like, what's the point? Like, what's the point of even doing that? It's just like, it's just so many moments like that don't make a lot of sense. And then they finally get to the Creator. They finally get to God, and he's just like, how did you break through the barrier? And Sybok is just like, oh, with the starship. And he's just like, and God's just like, could this ship carry me to carry my will? And Kirk just goes, what does God need with a starship? He's just like, and I felt like that was a scene. I felt like that was something that during the pitch meeting for this, a Paramount executive saw that line in the script and said, hey, Bill, what does God need with the starship? And Shatner probably went, exactly. And that's how it got into the movie. That's my thinking behind that. But no, it turns out this is not the Creator. This is actually another villain. And guess who the real villain of the movie is? Sybok. Yeah, they never really explain it. Sybok pretty much just goes, reveal yourself to me. And it turns out the Creator removes himself out of there, and it's just another version of Sybok. And it's just like, okay, like, does anyone here really know what the hell's going on here? And so basically, Sybok sacrifices himself to combat the creature. Kirk sacrifices himself, sending Spock and McCoy back to the ship while Kirk tries to take down the being. And then the Klingon ship that was following them throughout the course of the movie, I forgot to mention that comes back into play. And really, that's a scene that's completely unnecessary, because they make it seem like this Klingon guy is going to be a villain, but they have a Klingon diplomat on the ship. They could probably tell the guy that, hey, these guys are cool and everything, but never really get to do that. But, yeah, that's pretty much Star Trek V. And then they have this message about how maybe God is inside of us. Human heart kind of stuff. And the movie just ends with them going back to shore leave, and once again got to finish it with row, row, row your boat, which apparently was a huge laugh riot for the people, for William Shatner, who had to end the movie like this. And yeah, this movie is terrible. This is a terrible, terrible movie. And yeah, you could honestly feel like it felt like he was trying to destroy the goodwill that he had with this series. And it just didn't feel like his heart was in the right place for this. Maybe you could say the writer's strike had something to do with it, but you gotta know this stuff, dude. You gotta know this stuff better before you could say, hey, I want to direct this movie. But yeah, Star Trek V is one of the worst movies of this. Is the worst movie of this franchise, without a doubt. And at least they were able to rectify it with the last movie they did, the next movie, The Undiscovered Country, but we'll get to that when we get to that in 1991. So that's my thoughts on Star Trek V, The Final Frontier. It's a bad movie. It's definitely the worst of the series. And, yeah, almost killed the Star Trek franchise in general, which is hard to believe, but there was a point when that almost happened. So that's my thoughts on Star Trek V, The Final Frontier. Now, with that said, that's going to wrap up another edition of Time About the Movies. Thank you guys for watching. Next week, we talk about Ghostbusters 2. So expect a full review of that tomorrow, because that was the only new release that came out the next weekend. So I'll definitely have a full review on that one as well. So thank you guys for watching, and if you like what you see and you want to see more episodes like this, go ahead and hit the playlist on the next page. Check out the previous episode I did. And I'll see you guys tomorrow for the Ghostbusters 2 review. So thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you tomorrow. Until then, take care.